Campfire stories from the Dying Embers universe. Dragons, aliens, and things that go boomp in the night.
Siege time.
Part 3.
I need to submit a wild rife report for the, she glanced around uneasily, the haunt cat. And regulations say someone else needs to edit it before I enter it in the big book. I don't know a thing about mammals, Pat said with a frown. You sure you want me to look it over? All you need to know is how to spell, she assured him. Well, no promises, Pat said as the line moved forward. You want to meet me in the library come Monday? Actually, Keynes was very proud of how even she kept her voice. I was wondering if you'd come over after we use the phone. I have the big book and my notes in my apartment. Pat gave her a startled glance, and if he blushed a little, well, the sun was going down and the light was turning orange. Who could tell? Sure, he said quickly. Be glad to. It might take a while, Keynes said. I'll make dinner for us while you look over it. I'll wash the dishes while you enter it in the big book, Pat said. Your roommates won't mind? They took off for town after work today, she said. Pat reached the phone and grinned at her until he had to turn to insert the quarter and dial. Old man, it's your wayward son. Cadence smiled and gave herself a little hug as she stood there waiting for him to be finished with the phone. Later, as Cadence entered her final draft into the big book, while the plates clinked gently in the sink, her mind was drawn back to the description she had given of the haunt cat. Pat had made no notes on that. He had only pointed out that her switching between metric and imperial units, had questions about whether the headwaters of Pinecone Creek were really 30 meters from the peak of Shriner Mountain, and other technical stuff. He had even offered to and had measured her knife in centimeters so she wouldn't have to do the mass conversions again. He hadn't indicated the slightest doubt that she had seen a giant glowing cougar near the top of the mountain, something she hadn't realized had been tight uncurled in her as that sank in. Cadence gave a tired sigh and leaned back in the wooden chair as she added the final period to her entry and closed the book. She walked over to the couch and let herself fall into it, letting the leather notebook fall open in her lap. Pat came out of the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel, and glanced uncertainly between the seat beside her and the door. Cadence smiled and patted the cushion beside her, and Pat accepted the invitation. There's a lot of interesting stories in here, Cadence said. I mean, I haven't read them yet, but there must be. I bet, Pat agreed, glancing down at the page the book had fallen open to. Even I've heard tales of the haunt cat and the mechanics fay. It supposedly stalks whichever snowplow is about to break down up on the high roads. What's this about spikes on the legs? Cadence started and glanced down, actually looking at the older entries for the first time. She followed Pat's pointing finger, and sure enough, there was a description of tall spikes growing out of the haunt cat's joints. But no diamond tip to the tail. Cadence rubbed her eyes and bent over the book with a frown. When did this start? She demanded, flipping to the front of the book. The first entry was dated from 1957, but was only a short list of second-hand sightings brought in by the backcountry rangers and backpackers. Brief sentences, often only detailing which side of the park it was in and the general date range. These older reports seemed to start about 10 years back, and Ken's lips tightened at the level of scientific effort she had put into her reports. The descriptions were all very similar. A big glowing cat off in the distance, the possibility of it being covered in bioluminescent bacteria was mentioned, along with complaints that it might be some circus's escaped pet. This last possibility seemed to have been what inspired this record, along with a noted effort to trap it, or at least identify the circus of origin for a fine, but it was noticed that no deliberate search for the haunts cat had ever produced a single sighting or sign, so the park had formally retired their attempts to trap it in the early 60s. Cadence went to turn the page again when Pat's hand stopped her. She started as she realized what a bad host she was being, but a glance at his face, very close over her shoulder, she realized with a blush showed that he was equally interested in the contents. That's Peters, he said, pointing at one of the first individual entries. The guy who found those kids who went missing in the backcountry back in, I think it was 65 or 66? What kids? She asked.
End of Part 3.
Barred has led his pool of outcast warriors across the stars to this strange blue planet with its cold, nearly dead surface. For years, they clung to each other in the magma caverns, only going to the surface to humor the curiosity of their hosts, until the day a young alien wandered into Bard's song and resonated with him, and gave his pool a hope of something more. Now, a dark threat from Bard's homeworld threatens the fragile connection he has formed with this alien family, and the stars sing of war.
Get your copy of Hidden Fires, available only on Indiegogo this October 2024. Check out the link below the video, like, subscribe, and share.